All right, let's dive right in. When I say the name John Calvin, what's the first thing you think of? I'm guessing for a lot of you, it's this kind of stern, joyless guy from a textbook. Well, we're going to look past that reputation and try to find the actual person hiding under all of it.
And yeah, that reputation is pretty intense. Just look at this quote from the writer Christopher Hitchens. He calls Calvin a sadist, a torturer, and a killer. Wow. I mean, that's a powerful, damning image, and it's one that is really stuck in the popular imagination.
But you gotta ask, right? Is that the whole story? Is this caricature painted by his harshest critics what he was really like? That's the big question we're gonna dig into.
So first, we have to really get a handle on the myth itself. And we're not talking about some small misunderstanding. This is a huge, deeply rooted caricature that has pretty much defined the man for centuries.
The language people use to describe him is just wild. You get phrases like gloomy creed or the dark despot of Geneva. It's not just a polite disagreement. You have guys like H.L. Mencken saying he turned God into a superior sort of devil, and others calling his work the plague and scourge of the church. This is way past simple criticism. This is a full-on character assassination.
So, where did all this come from? It's easy to just blame his enemies, but it's actually a bit more complicated. Turns out the myth comes from his critics, sure, but also from his supposed friends, and maybe even from our own modern ways of looking at the world.
Okay, so check this out. This slide lays it all bare. On one side, you've got the gloomy, ruthless despot. But on the other, you have people who actually knew him, like his successor, Theodore Beza, who said he had a vivid humanitas and gentle courtesy. Scholars have called him one of the greatest theologians ever. So, how can we be talking about the same guy?
Well, it seems like this whole caricature comes from three main places. First, obviously, his fierce opponents, who use some pretty venomous language. Second, and this one is huge, some of his own followers. Later Calvinists built these super rigid systems that kind of twisted his original ideas. And third, there's us. We have a bad habit of projecting our 21st century ideas back onto a 16th century person.
This quote from the theologian Holmes Ralston III just nails that second point. He felt that the system we call Calvinism was a total distortion and that the only way to fix it was to go back and read Calvin's own words. It's this idea that Calvinism got totally disconnected from Calvin the person.
So now, let's try to build a different picture. We're going to chip away at that gloomy myth by looking at some pretty surprising stuff from Calvin's own life and his own writing.
One of the big pillars of the Calvin myth is that he was an agelist. It's a great word. It means someone who just never, ever laughs or smiles. You know the picture, a stern, humorless guy. But does the evidence actually back that up?
Not even close. It turns out Calvin had this biting, kind of sarcastic wit. In one of his works, he just takes down the whole industry of selling holy relics. He points out that, based on all the relics for sale, every apostle must have had at least 4 bodies. There were enough splinters of the cross out there to build a whole ship and an absolutely impossible amount of the Virgin Mary's breast milk. This isn't a gloomy guy. This is someone with a seriously sharp sense of humor.
And that wit shows a mind that could cut through the nonsense. You see that same surprising depth when you look at his actual theology. Was it all just cold, hard logic? Not according to him. He insisted that real faith isn't some idea you have in your head. It has to live down in your heart.
And you know what? Nothing shows this better than his personal seal. It was a hand offering a heart, and the motto said, "My heart I offer to thee, O Lord, promptly and sincerely." Think about that. This was the image he chose to represent himself, a symbol of passionate, sincere devotion, not cold logic.
This brings us to what might be the real key to unlocking the guy. See, for centuries, everyone, friends and enemies alike, has tried to boil his whole theology down to one single point, like God's sovereignty. But when you do that, you totally miss the living, breathing heart of his work.
I love this metaphor from our source material. Looking at Calvin's ideas one by one is like looking at a bunch of separate pearls just sitting on a table. They only make sense, they only become a beautiful necklace when you find the hidden string that ties them all together.
So what's the string? What's the hidden center? Well, many scholars now agree it's this one, central idea, union with Christ. Calvin himself called it a mystical union. It's this deep, life-changing connection where Christ actually lives in a person's heart. It's not about agreeing with a list of rules. It's about being joined to a person.
And this is a total game changer. Union with Christ isn't just one more doctrine, it's the master key. It changes how you see everything else. All of a sudden, a really tough idea like predestination isn't about some cosmic lottery. For Calvin, it was about the comfort of knowing your life is held securely by Christ. This one idea transforms his work from a rigid system into a living relational faith.
Okay, so we've taken on the myth. But why does any of this matter today? I mean, who cares if we get a historical figure right? What's the big takeaway for us?
Well, I think what this all shows is just how powerful a caricature can be, and how easily it can hide a much more complicated truth. It's a reminder that if you really want to understand someone from the past, you have to look beyond the attacks from their enemies and, just as important, the rigid systems built by their followers. And in the end, we find that the real center of Calvin's world wasn't a gloomy doctrine, but this joyful, mystical idea of union with Christ.
And as we wrap this up, I want to leave you with this one last, really profound thought from the author of our source. He says that when we try to see the real face of John Calvin by looking down into the deep well of history, we can't help but see glimpses of our own reflection in the water.
Which leaves us with a final question to chew on. When we look into the past and we judge the people we see there, how much of them are we really seeing? And how much of it is just a reflection of ourselves?